Hello my friends, and welcome back to part 3 of the Curious World of MrRay, and really hope you enjoyed those shows. What can I say? Big fan of Sam Raimi, big fan of Bruce Campbell, big fan of Heath Ledger, and Legend of the Seeker. All of this stuff, like I say, is available for free on YouTube. You can find the entire season of all of these shows. Certainly the first season. Some of them you might even find the second, but everything's available on streaming sites these days. I just want to make you aware of these great shows that are so readily available and so easy to watch at the moment on YouTube. So, hope you enjoyed them. Now, next segment of the show, have I got a humdinger for you? I've got 8 movies for you to choose from. You can obviously watch any or all of them, or none of them, I suppose. If you're not a big movie fan or you're not into sword and sorcery, stick around for next week, because I'm flipping the coin. And next week it's going to be a sci-fi special. This week's fantasy, next week's sci-fi. So hope you enjoy next week if this week wasn't your bag. But great movies. Before moving on to the closing section of the show, in this final segment, because I didn't do any curious thoughts last week, I thought I might give you a second curious thought this week. I thought I might tell you about why HEMA, historical European martial arts, disappeared when Eastern martial arts have been put on a pedestal and are practiced frequently to this day. The truth is quite interesting. It actually goes back to the start of the use of gunpowder. Now, obviously, the Chinese had gunpowder long before anybody else did, but the way that they chose to use gunpowder wasn't to create firearms. Instead, they used it to create fireworks and things. And I'm quite certain that they understood fully that they could have used gunpowder to create a weapon of destruction. And they were amongst the first to use guns, but even at the same time as making them, there was a very interesting propaganda campaign that began when firearms became a thing. Back then, in Japan, say, there was a feudal system, and it was the knights of the time were the samurai in Japan, and when firearms became more commonplace, their propaganda campaign was incredibly successful. They told the villagers, look, even if you could get your hands on firearms, they would do you no good, because the samurai are so skilled. They would cut the bullets from the air. Now, hopefully that sounds ridiculous to you, because it is. Nobody has the skill to cut bullets out of the air. It's an impossibility. You would need to literally be superhuman. But the funny thing is, many people to this day kind of still believe that propaganda. It was so successful, and firearms were suppressed in Eastern cultures, and martial arts were, like I say, propagandized and put up on a pedestal of excellence. And whereas in the West, we used to have an incredibly similar culture as they did in Japan with the ruling classes. except instead of like the emperor and the samurai and shogun and whatnot, what we had were it was the king and his knights, and the knights were the samurai of the West and in Europe, and they trained from infancy in the same way that the samurai did. They trained from childhood in the arts of not just the sword, but the lance, the axe, the spear, the mace, all the weapons of war that you would associate with those times. Knights were trained in, and they were trained to do it in full armour. Now, it took many years, like I say, training from childhood to produce a knight. But when the kings of the time got access to gunpowder and early firearms, they very quickly saw the advantages of being able to arm the peasantry and create a vast army out of the peasantry using this new technology relatively cheaply compared to what it costs to have a single knight. Because the knights, the king was essentially granting them land in order to finance their lifestyles, which were essential. They had to eat well in order to be fit and healthy to fight. They had to be well armoured. Armour, the price of armour, the equivalent price nowadays would be buying like a Ferrari or a Porsche, some kind of high-end sports car, the cost of armour. Then there were the horses and the servants to run the land. The feudal system that was in place at the time afforded that for a lifestyle for knights that was quite extravagant, and it was essentially coming out of the king's pocket each time. And the kings of the time, they realised, like I say, it was much cheaper to arm the peasantry, and therefore all of the great martial arts, the martial skills, because if you believe that Europeans just swung round their swords like baseball bats, then you will be surprised when you start looking into him. I really hope you check out the content creators that I suggest in the first part and their videos that I've left links to their content after my episode's finished, because wow, it'll really surprise you how sophisticated it is. Because like I say, Asian martial arts has been, and Eastern martial arts as a whole, has been put on a pedestal of excellence, and it was predominantly because of a propaganda campaign, a very successful one. Whereas in the West, we had a far more pragmatic attitude towards the use of firearms, and therefore our martial arts died off in a few generations and basically stopped being practiced when they were replaced with firearms. Other martial arts came into play. Use of the saber continued for a long time into the use of firearms, well into repeating firearms and whatnot, into the First World War and Second World War. There's accounts of swords being used, but ultimately they had their day, and martial arts were more or less forgotten. And now they're making a comeback, which is incredibly exciting. So I hope you enjoyed my curious thought, and the second one of this episode. And now it's time for the 8 movies that I've selected. Now, first one's an absolute classic. We've got the Pirates of Tortuga, some full-on swashbuckling. What can I say about Pirates of Tortuga? If Pirates of the Caribbean and My Fair Lady had a baby, it would be Pirates of Tortuga. It's such a funny, charming film. Definitely a film of its time, a real swashbuckler. After that, I promised you more Sinbad, and more Sinbad we have. Not one, but 2 of the great Sinbad films of yesteryear. We have the 7th Voyage of Sinbad in Dynamation. Really highly recommend that you watch the trailer for it, because it's fascinating just seeing the terminology that was used, like back in, like, I think it was 1958. It was really quite early in the special effects industry, and to the point where I'm not even sure if special effects was even a term. Like I say, they're using words like dynamation and new techniques using electric and colour. That kind of early, you know, and fascinating trailer for it. But the movie itself is amazing. Fantastic example of Ray Harryhausen. Love to talk about Ray Harryhausen. Could talk about him all day. One of the greats in special effects history. His stop motion work is nothing short of legendary, from Jason and the Argonauts to Clash of the Titans, and also the next two Sinbad films. Like I say, we've got The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, and we've also got The Golden Voyage of Sinbad. This one's from the 70s, a bit later. Another great example of Ray Harryhausen. This guy dominated the industry from the 50s right through into the 80s. This guy's work was just prevalent everywhere. It was just an incredible thing that he did at a time when most other movie studios were forced to dress a guy in a rubber suit. He was really pushing the industry into the direction that it would one day go, and we now have modern day CGI in no small part because of his early efforts into special effects. So Ray Harryhausen movies, must watch. If you haven't seen them before, give them a watch. If you have seen them, you know they're great films. So, but like I say, check out the trailer for Seventh Voyage because it's fascinating. The next group of films, because these are kind of in groups, we've got like a full-on swashbuckling set with the Sinbad and the Pirates of Tortuga, but we've got Hundra, great film, great female protagonist, very strong female character, at a time where the sexploitation was rife. Hundra stood apart as being like really kind of a true feminist example at a time where it wasn't really a trope like it is nowadays. You know, it was a very original idea to have such a girl boss character back then. Hundra is a one well worth watching if you haven't seen it. Sorceress, it's the sexploitation that I'm talking about. This is the sort of film that if the plot ever gets a bit slow or they run out of action, there's always boobies. You know, who doesn't like boobies? So, there's Sorceress. That's an absolute classic in the fantasy genre. And then we're moving on to like the big old Mac daddies here. We've got some real stonkers. We've got Conan the Barbarian. The Conan. Arnold Schwarzenegger. What is best in life? Conan. That's what's best in life. Now, following Conan, we have Red Sonja. Something many people don't know about Red Sonja is that it's actually a spiritual sequel to Conan. The original part that Arnold Schwarzenegger plays in this Red Sonja movie was supposed to be Conan, but they couldn't get the rights to Conan through, I believe it was Marvel at the time. I may be wrong, but I think it was Marvel that owned the rights at that point in Universal, and they kind of like said nix on getting him for the sequel, but they could get Arnie. So in my own head canon, it's Conan going by a pseudonym for some reason. But that's how I explain my head canon for the Arnold Schwarzenegger clearly Conan analogue in Red Sonja. But another brilliant film. And to round out the movies and really the episode of the Curious World, finishing off segment 3, the movie section, we have Legend. This one, Tim Curry, is an absolute hero of mine. Is not just as an actor, which his body of work is incredible, from Frank and Furker right through to Darkness here, and even his later stuff like the Home Alone. I just loved Tim Curry so much, and his voice acting is just so prolific. It's ubiquitous with animation. His voice, I grew up, I can like most people, can immediately recognise Tim Curry's voice, despite his incredible range. He's just such an incredible guy. So Tim Curry's a legend. Very, very young Tom Cruise, before all the strangeness began with that guy, when he was a young man and an up-and-comer. Ridley Scott took him under his wing with this film and put him well on the path to becoming the star that he would become. So yeah, directed by Ridley Scott, legend, should mention it. Also stars the ever beautiful Mia Sara. You may recognise her from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Right, no more hanging about. I've got another closing segment to record after this, a little outro where I'll play us out with a ukulele closer, and then that's it until next week. I hope everyone's looking forward to the science fiction special. Right, handing it over to future me after these incredible movies. I hope you enjoy some of them. And until next time, see you soon.